Okay, so welcome to the Chatterbox Network, where we talk about the things people whisper about but are too afraid to say out loud. I'm Sassy Girl XO, and this is where we unpack the truth, expose the patterns, tell the stories, and turn the pain into power. No pretending, no sugarcoating, and no shrinking. So whether you're healing, rebuilding, leveling up, or finally seeing someone for exactly who they are, you're in the right place. So turn it up, get comfortable, and let's talk about it. This is the Chatterbox Network, and I'm Sassy Girl XO, and baby, we're about to get into it. So, the circus. Welcome to the show nobody volunteered to join. So, welcome back to the show. Today, we're going somewhere a little darker. We're talking about something I call the circus. And if you've listened to my song, Welcome to the Circus, you already know exactly where I'm going with this. Because sometimes what looks like a relationship isn't really functioning like a relationship at all. Sometimes you're looking at a system built around attention, validation, competition, jealousy, confusion, dependency, and control. And at the center of that system is somebody who needs to constantly feel important. So today we're going to talk about how that circus can work, why people get trapped inside it, and why the women often end up fighting each other instead of recognizing the actual dynamic. And most importantly, how do you get out? Let's talk. Act 1, welcome to the circus. Imagine walking into a circus. There's a ring in the middle. The lights are shining. The music is playing. Everyone has a role. Everybody has a role. And someone is standing at the center, making sure that everyone is watching. Now imagine that instead of performers, the circus is made up of relationships. One woman is being love bombed. Another is being ignored. Another one is told that she's just a friend. Another one is receiving late night attention. Another has been promised a future. Another believes that she's the only one. And the person in the middle, he's collecting all of it. Attention, admiration, validation, desire, emotional energy, all of which I call supply. And every reaction becomes another piece of fuel. That is the circus. Act 2. How does the circus start? The circus usually doesn't begin with chaos. It begins with charm. That's important. Because if someone walked up to you and said, hello, I'm going to manipulate the shit out you, destroy your confidence, and make you dependent on my validation, and keep several other bitches around so everyone competes for me, you'd probably say, boy, bye. Have a nice day. Take your ass over there. So that is not how it works. It begins with attraction, attention, charm, chemistry, compliments, intensity. And sometimes an extraordinarily amount of attention very quickly. It's called love bombing. You feel seen, you feel understood, you feel special. You think, finally, somebody gets me. But the question isn't simply, how does he make me feel? The question is, what happens after he has me emotionally attached? That's where the story changes. Okay, Act 3, the scouting process. One of the concepts behind Welcome to the Circus is the idea of scouting. A person who relies heavily on external validation has become highly attentive to people who are easier to emotionally influence. That doesn't mean that every woman who struggles with confidence is vulnerable to manipulation. Absolutely not. And it doesn't mean that every charming person is a manipulator. But when somebody deliberately looks for insecurity because they know insecurity gives them leverage, that's dangerous. Maybe she's recently divorced. Maybe she's lonely. Maybe she's been cheated on. Maybe she doesn't feel attractive. Maybe she spent years being criticized. Maybe she's been desperately wanting to feel chosen. Maybe she spent her entire life wondering whether she's enough. A manipulating person can recognize those vulnerabilities, and instead of helping them strengthen them, they exploit them. They become the person who says, you're beautiful, you're different. I've never met anyone like you. You're the only woman I want. And the woman who doesn't realize that what she's receiving isn't necessarily love, that it may be leverage. I'm just going to be honest with you. Act 4, the validation trap. This is where the circus gets powerful because validation feels good. There's nothing wrong with wanting affection. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel beautiful. There's nothing wrong with wanting your partner to reassure you. But the problem occurs when somebody deliberately makes you dependent upon their reassurance. They give you validation. Then they withdraw it. You panic. They give it back. You relax. They withdraw it again. Now you're chasing the emotional high, and eventually you are not asking, is this person good for me? You're asking, how do I get them to love me again? And that's a completely different question. There's a role reversal, and that's how the circus gets an audience. Act 5, enter the harem. Now let me tell you the part that inspired one of the biggest lines in the song. Bitches, he's my man. And the response is, no, bitch, he's ours. Yeah. Because imagine discovering that the man that you thought was exclusively investing in you has been maintaining an entire network of women. Suddenly you have a decision. You can compete or you can investigate the system. Competition says, how do I beat her? Awareness says, why is there a her? Now, that's a completely different mindset because the other women may not be your enemy. She may be receiving the same script. She may be believing the same lies. She may be, have no idea what you know. Hell, she may not even have no idea that you exist. And while the women are fighting each other, the person at the center gets exactly what he wanted, attention. And actually, the person at the center is the one that should get his ass whooped for stirring up all the bullshit. That's neither here or there. I'm just saying. Act number 6, triangulation. One of the most destructive mechanisms in these dynamics is triangulation. That's when another person is introduced into the emotional equation in a way that creates insecurity, jealousy, competition, or comparison. Suddenly you're thinking, who is she? Why does he like her picture? Why did he answer her, her, but not me? Or why does she get the attention I used to get? Or, what does she have that I don't? And then now you're no longer focused on the quality of your relationship. You're focused on winning. That's the trap. Because once you're competing, you're no longer evaluating whether the prize is worth having. You're just trying to prove that you can win it. Act 7, the man who needs an audience. Now, here's the uncomfortable question. What does someone get from manipulating multiple sources of admiration? For someone who requires constant external validation, the answer may be significance. Every message says, I'm wanted. Every woman says, I'm desirable. Every jealous reaction says, I'm important. Every person chasing them says, I have power. That's why walking away can be so threatening to the system. You're not merely removing yourself from the relationship. You're removing yourself from your supply of attention from the system. And if several people do that, the circus gets very quiet. Act 8, why women stay. Now, this is where we need compassion because it's easy to look at someone trapped in a toxic dynamic and say, well, hell, why don't you just leave? That's not always that simple. That's not always that simple. That's what I meant to say. That's not always that simple. Attachment is powerful. Intermittent reinforcement is powerful. It's mind control. It's programming. Hope is powerful. Trauma bonds can be powerful. And when someone has repeatedly, alternated affection with rejection, the brain can become intensely, focused on getting the affection back. You're not necessarily staying because you're stupid. You may be staying because your emotional system has been trained to chase the next reward. That's why shame doesn't heal people. Awareness does. So Act 9, the moment the circus breaks. So how do you break it? First, stop competing. You don't need to beat other women. You need to stop playing the game. Second, stop using his attention as your scoreboard. His attention doesn't determine your beauty. His rejection doesn't determine your value. His commitment does not determine your worth. His infidelity doesn't, make other women better than you. Third, stop auditioning. If you constantly have to prove that you're worthy of being loved, you're already standing on the wrong stage. Healthy love does not require you to perform your position. Number 4, rebuild your identity. Who were you before this person entered your life? What did you enjoy? What did you believe? What were your dreams? What did you want? What did you stop doing? Find that woman again, and then introduce her to the woman that you're becoming. Okay? Now, Act 10. Learn your worth and stand on it. Now, this is where the song becomes bigger than the man, because healing isn't, I'm going to make him regret losing me. Healing is, I don't need him to regret anything. That's freedom. Okay? You don't need him watching your glow up. You don't need him jealous. You don't need him begging. You don't need him calling. You don't need him realizing that he lost the best thing that he ever had. Would it feel good? Sure. But that's not freedom. Freedom is when his reaction becomes irrelevant. That's when the circus loses its power. Act 11, don't become part of the next circus. And here's another warning. After, leaving a manipulative relationship, don't carry the circus with you. Don't make every new relationship a courtroom. Don't interrogate every woman. Don't assume every compliment is manipulation. And don't confuse boundaries with walls. Don't confuse intuition with constant suspicion. Healing means that you're learning how to recognize patterns without allowing the past to dictate your future. You don't want to leave one circus and accidentally build another down one inside your head. Act 12, the exit. The exit isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's simply, I'm done. Sometimes it's blocking the number. Sometimes it's refusing the conversation. Sometimes it's no longer, sometimes it's no longer responding. Sometimes it's getting support. It's therapy. It's rebuilding your finances. It's finding somewhere safe to live. Sometimes it's reconnecting with people that you've isolated from. Sometimes it's simply making one decision today that you couldn't make yesterday, but every step counts, because freedom isn't always one giant leap. Sometimes it's 1,000 tiny decisions that eventually lead you out of the tent, So the final message. So here's what I want you to remember. If you're sitting in a circus right now, you don't have to win the circus. You don't have to become the favorite. You don't have to defeat the other women. You don't have to prove that you're prettier or that you're better. You don't have to make him regret anything. You don't have to get revenge. You can just simply leave, because maybe the greatest plot twist is that you become the woman that he couldn't replace. Maybe is the greatest plot twist is that you finally realize that he was never the prize. You were. Your peace was, your confidence was, your future was, your identity was, your life was. You feel me? So, welcome to the circus. Now that you can see the stage, you can choose whether, you keep sitting in the audience, and if you're ready, stand up, walk out, cut the cycle, learn your worth and stand on it, and never audition for a role that you were never meant to play again. So, I think that's it. That's where we're going to go ahead and leave it today, and I'll see you next time. But remember, don't just survive the circus, leave the tent, and your story doesn't end where somebody else tried to break you. Take what you heard, sit with it, learn from it, and most importantly, choose yourself. If this conversation spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes one conversation can be the very thing that helps someone finally see the light. Until next time, keep your boundaries strong, your standards high, your crown right where it belongs. I'm Sassy Girl XO, and this is the Chatterbox Network. Keep talking, keep healing, keep rising, and baby, never forget who you are. I'll see you in the next conversation.